The wind sliced through Elara Bennett's wool coat as if it were made of paper. She counted the coins again, fifth time now, spreading them across the frozen depot bench with fingers turned ghostly white at the tips. $14. The ticket master had scoffed when she'd shown him Aunt Marjorie's note about the prepaid passage to the orphanage. There ain't no prepaid passage, girl. And there ain't no train coming tonight neither. The oil lamp overhead sputtered twice, then went dark. Blackness consumed everything except the scent of coal smoke from the departed train and the howl of wind tearing through the depot rafters. The temperature had plunged past 20 below an hour earlier. She pulled her father's pocket watch from inside her mitten, the only warm thing left in existence. The metal captured just enough starlight to reveal the engraving on the back, letters she couldn't decipher but had traced countless times. Then hoofbeats, growing louder through the snow. The horse was enormous, its breath rising in white clouds against the frozen air. The woman who dismounted moved deliberately, like someone who'd survived this weather 100 times before. She wore a heavy coat thick with snow, hat pulled low against the wind. "Anyone here?" Her voice cut through the storm, gruff but not harsh. Elara tried to respond. Her jaw wouldn't cooperate. The muscles were too frozen. She managed a noise that could have been yes or could have been nothing at all. The woman's boots crunched nearer. She dropped to one knee beside the bench, positioning her face where Elara could see it without moving. Weathered features, perhaps 60 years old, steel-gray eyes that seemed to notice everything. Those eyes traveled to Elara's hands, still gripping the coins, then to the watch. She went completely still. "That's Owen Bennett's watch." "Not a question." Her voice had shifted, gone tight with something Elara couldn't identify. "Where's your father, child?" "Papa's dead." The words emerged thick and slurred. 6 months now. The woman's expression did something complicated. She reached slowly for the watch, turned it over, studied the engraving in the starlight. Her hands trembled, but not from the cold. "You're Elara?" She nodded. That wasn't a question either. The woman pulled a blanket from her saddle, thick wool that carried the smell of horse and leather and something like safety. She draped it around Elara's shoulders without touching more than necessary. "I'm Josephine Hartwell. Your father and I were partners once. Can you stand?" "Don't think so." "Then I'll need to lift you. Is that all right?" Elara nodded once more. Josephine lifted her as though she weighed nothing, settled her in front of the saddle, then swung up behind. Her arms came around Elara to grip the reins, shielding her from the worst of the wind. "There's a ranch about 5 miles west. Warm house, hot meal, my daughter to look after you properly." She pressed her heels gently to the horse's flanks. The animal moved forward, steady despite the deep snow. "What were you doing out here alone?" "Aunt Marjorie brought me. Said she was sending me to St. Catherine's orphanage in Riverside. Said the passage was prepaid, but it wasn't." "No, Josephine Hartwell fell silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had turned as cold as the wind itself. "Your aunt left you here to die." It wasn't a question that time either. The ranch house burned with lamplight, windows casting amber warmth against the darkness. The door swung open before they reached it. A woman in her 50s stood there, silver hair pulled back neatly, her face etched with intelligence and concern. "Josie, what in heaven's name?" "This is Owen Bennett's daughter." Josephine dismounted, lifted Elara down carefully. She was at the depot alone in this cold. The woman's expression transformed. "Sweet merciful Lord, bring her inside. Rosa, hot water and broth now." The warmth inside struck like a physical force. Elara's skin burned where the heat touched it, the dangerous kind of burning that signaled real damage attempting to mend. The woman, Josephine's daughter, stripped off the frozen coat with practiced gentleness, replaced it with thick quilts. I'm Catherine Hartwell. You're safe now. Her hands examined Ilara's fingers and toes, checking for frostbite. Can you feel this? Yes. Good. That's very good. She continued working, massaging circulation back into frozen limbs. Rosa's bringing broth. Your stomach's too cold for milk just yet, but we'll warm you up. A Hispanic woman appeared carrying a steaming mug, vapor rising with the rich scent of beef and herbs. Josephine took it, tested the temperature, held it steady while Ilara sipped. The heat stung going down, but she welcomed it anyway. Josephine passed something to Catherine, a folded paper. She read it, her face turning to stone. Sending ward to St. Catherine's Orphanage. Prepaid passage enclosed. Child has accumulated debts requiring settlement. M. Dalton. Legal guardian. She looked up. There's a stamp from the ticket office. No payment received. She left her there to freeze. Josephine's voice was flat. On Christmas Eve. Ilara swallowed more broth, watching them through exhausted eyes. The warmth was making her lightheaded. She tried to speak, tried to explain about Aunt Marjorie being furious all the time lately, about her saying Ilara was too costly to keep, about the men who visited the house after dark demanding payment. Aunt Marjorie said you were dead, Miss Hartwell. The words emerged barely audible. But Papa told me before the mine collapsed, he said if I was ever alone, if I ever needed help, I should find Josephine Hartwell at Thornridge Ranch. Josephine's hand found her shoulder, careful and warm. Your father was right. And I'm going to make this proper. Ilara, I'm getting you legal custody. Catherine set the note down, her jaw tightening. This isn't guardianship, Josie. This is abandonment. Then we fix it through the law. She looked at Ilara, and something in her expression reminded Ilara of her father, that same unwavering resolve. Your papa named me in his will. Made it crystal clear. I'll go to Judge Morrison first thing after Christmas. Get the documents filed properly. Ilara's eyes were closing despite her resistance. The warmth, the food, the first real safety she'd felt in months, it pulled her toward sleep. Just before darkness claimed her, she heard Catherine say, "That watch." She wouldn't release it. Not even when her hands turned blue. It was Owen's. He always said it was for Josie, partners in everything. Josephine's voice sounded distant now. Ilara, does your aunt know about your father's trust fund? But she was already asleep, the question drifting unanswered in the warm air. New Year's Day arrived cold and crystalline, the kind of Wyoming morning where the sky was almost painful to behold. Ilara had been at the ranch a week, long enough to gain 3 pounds, long enough to sleep without waking in terror, long enough to start believing the warmth might be permanent. She was in the kitchen with Catherine, learning to knead bread dough, when the sound of approaching horses drifted through the frozen air. Catherine's hands froze. That's more than one rider. Josephine came in from the barn, Rosa behind her. Both women moved to the window. Josephine's face hardened. It's Marjorie. And she's brought Sheriff Dawson. Ilara's hands clenched in the dough, flour billowing white. Her stomach twisted sickeningly. Stay inside, Josephine said. She pulled on her coat and walked out to the porch, Rosa following. Catherine kept Ilara back from the window but didn't prevent her from watching. Marjorie Dalton sat her horse like a woman who believed the world owed her everything, lean, mid-40s, with a face that smiled often and meant it never. The sheriff beside her looked uneasy, a decent person trapped in an unpleasant situation. Marjorie. Josephine's voice rang clear in the frigid air. Josephine. Heard you picked up something that belongs to me. Marjorie's smile didn't reach her eyes. Come to collect my ward. She's not going anywhere. That's not your call to make. Marjorie pulled papers from her coat, waved them deliberately. I'm her legal guardian. Her father's sister. Blood kin. Sheriff here will confirm it. Territorial statute says blood relatives take precedence. Sheriff Dawson shifted in his saddle. It's true, Miss Hartwell. Unless there's proof of unfitness, the law favors family. She left her at the depot to freeze. Josephine's voice was quiet, but Ilara heard the fury beneath it. On Christmas Eve in 20 below weather. That's proof enough. I did no such thing. Marjorie's voice rose with manufactured outrage. I provided prepaid passage to a proper Christian orphanage. If the ticket master failed to honor it, that's not my fault. The child has needs I cannot meet, needs that require proper institutional care. You're a liar. Marjorie's smile widened. Careful, Josephine. That's slander, and it won't change the law. She gestured to the sheriff. Show her the statute. Sheriff Dawson pulled out a small book, read without enthusiasm. Territorial Code Section 47. In matters of guardianship, blood relations of the first degree shall take precedence over all other claims, unless said relation is proven morally unfit by a preponderance of evidence before a territorial judge. Then we'll go before a judge. Josephine stepped off the porch. Right now, today. We'll let Judge Morrison decide. Oh, we will. Marjorie folded her papers. But you should know Clarence Morrison and I have an arrangement. He's a reasonable man who respects the law. And the law says that girl is mine. Inside the kitchen, Ilara felt Catherine's hand tighten on her shoulder. Josephine moved closer to Marjorie's horse. She stays here until the hearing. Non-negotiable. Marjorie studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. Fine. Keep her warm for me. But Josephine, Judge Morrison owes me favors. You might have saved Owen's daughter from the cold, but you won't save her from the law. She wheeled her horse around and departed, the sheriff following with a backward glance that might have been apologetic. Rosa spat into the snow after they were gone. That woman has a rotten soul. Doesn't matter. Josephine came back inside, her face tense. What matters is the law, and we need to understand exactly what we're facing. An hour later, Catherine was unpacking Ilara's carpet bag, the small, worn case Marjorie had left at the depot. Most of it was empty. A spare dress too small by 2 sizes. A hairbrush with half its bristles missing. And at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, a sealed envelope. Catherine turned it over. Read the return address. Her face went ashen. Josie, you need to see this. Josephine took the envelope, broke the seal, pulled out the letter inside. Started reading. Stopped. Read it again. Sweet Lord. What is it? Rosa moved closer. Josephine's hand was trembling. She read aloud, her voice flat with shock. Wyoming Territorial Bank, Riverside. To whom it may concern. This letter confirms that the sum of $18,000, proceeds from the sale of the Silver Pine mining claim, has been deposited in trust for Miss Ilara Bennett, daughter of Owen Bennett, deceased. Said funds to be held until Miss Bennett reaches her 18th birthday, to be administered by her legal guardian as necessary for her care and education. The kitchen went silent except for the crackling of the stove. $18,000. Catherine said it like a prayer or a curse. Marjorie knows about this. Of course she knows. Josephine looked at Ilara, and she saw something like sorrow in her face. That's why she kept you, child. That's why she didn't send you to an orphanage when your papa died. And that's why she's fighting for guardianship now. Ilara's voice came out small. I don't understand. Your papa sold his mining claim before he died. Set the money aside for you, for when you're grown. Josephine's jaw worked. But until you're 18, your legal guardian controls that money. Can withdraw it for your care and education. Josephine's voice was hard. Marjorie's been waiting for the right moment to drain that trust fund completely. Rosa made a low sound in her throat. The whole town knew about Marjorie's gambling, about the debts to Helena Cross, the loan shark who ran the back room at the Golden Eagle Saloon. About $600 owed with interest compounding weekly. She tried to steal from her. Catherine's voice was tight with fury. And when she couldn't figure out how to do it quietly, she decided to abandon her. Let her freeze, collect the money anyway as her grieving aunt. The back door opened. Doc Fletcher came in without knocking, the way old friends did, stamping snow from his boots. He stopped when he saw their faces. What happened? Josephine handed him the letter. The doctor read it, his weathered face going grim. Marjorie filed something this morning. Didn't know what it was about, but I saw her at the courthouse with her attorney. What kind of filing? Petition to liquidate the trust fund. Claims Ilara accumulated debts under her care, medical expenses, schooling costs, room and board. Says the money needs to be accessed immediately to settle accounts. Josephine's fist hit the table hard enough to rattle the bread pans. She's got 6 weeks, maybe 8, before a judge reviews that petition. If she gets guardianship confirmed before then, she takes everything, Rosa finished. Every cent Owen saved for his daughter. Ilara felt the weight of all their eyes turning to her. $18,000. She couldn't picture that much money, couldn't imagine what it bought or what it meant, but she understood the look on their faces. She understood that Aunt Marjorie had tried to kill her for it. Doc Fletcher stayed through the afternoon, writing out a formal medical examination in his careful script. He had Ilara sit by the lamp while he checked her eyes, her teeth, the old scars on her feet. Frostbite damage, he said, touching the white patches on her toes. Months old, maybe years. These weren't treated properly when they happened. Aunt Marjorie said doctors cost too much. Ilara's voice was quiet. Doc's jaw tightened. Child, when did you last have a full meal? Before you came here, I mean. She thought about it. There was stew on Thanksgiving, but Aunt Marjorie ate most of it. He wrote that down, too. Measured her height, her weight, noted the way her dress hung loose despite Catherine's cooking. When he finished, he had 3 pages of documentation. This is neglect, he said to Josephine. Medical evidence of prolonged malnutrition and untreated injuries. In front of Judge Morrison, this carries weight. Enough weight to overcome blood relation. I don't know. But it's a start. Doc folded his papers. I'll submit this as an affidavit. Meanwhile, you need to understand what you're up against. Marjorie's got Lawrence Pierce as her attorney. That snake from Riverside who specializes in probate disputes. And Pierce doesn't lose. After Doc left, Catherine pulled out a primer, the kind used in frontier schools for children just learning letters. She set it on the kitchen table in front of Ilara. Can you read this? Ilara looked at the page. The letters swam together, meaningless as bird tracks in snow. Shame burned hot in her chest. No, Catherine's face softened. Not your fault, child, but we need to know where we stand. She pointed to the first word. Do you know any letters at all? Ilara shook her head. Aunt Marjorie had said schooling was a waste. Girls didn't need reading, just needed to know how to cook and clean and keep quiet. Josephine made a sound from across the room. When Ilara looked up, her face was tight with controlled rage. She kept you illiterate on purpose, Josephine said. Easier to control, easier to steal from. Catherine touched Ilara's hand. We have 6 weeks before the hearing. If you can read by then, even just a little, it proves that Jose's guardianship is working, that you're thriving here in ways you never did with Marjorie. I can learn. The hope in her own voice surprised Ilara. You can learn. Catherine opened the primer to the first page. We start with your name. E, that's the letter it begins with. Like this. She traced it with her finger. Ilara copied the motion, feeling the shape of it. The letter that started her name. The letter she'd never known before. 3 weeks passed. The winter deepened, then started its slow, grudging retreat. Ice on the water trough thinned from 4 inches to 2. The sun stayed up past 5 o'clock. Ilara spent 2 hours every morning with Catherine and the primer, tracing letters until her fingers cramped. ELARAROSE, simple words that opened like doors. Cat, dog, sun. Each one a small victory. Rosa taught her to curry the horses, to muck stalls, to carry water without spilling. Showed her how the ranch worked, the daily rhythm of feeding and checking and mending that kept 2,000 acres running through winter. And Josephine was teaching her something else. How to read ledgers, how to track inventory, how to understand the numbers that meant the difference between prosperity and ruin. Your papa and I built this ranch together, she said one evening, the account book spread between them. Started with 300 head of cattle and a dream. Now we're running 2,400 head. That's worth about $43,000, give or take. Ilara stared at the numbers. She couldn't read all the words yet, but she understood the columns. Money in, money out, the careful tracking of every transaction. Why are you showing me this? Because you're going to need to know it. Josephine's voice was quiet. When you stand in front of Judge Morrison, you're going to need to show him you're not just some helpless child. You're Owen Bennett's daughter. You're smart and capable, and you deserve better than what Marjorie gave you. That night, Ilara practiced writing her name until the candle burned low. ELARAROSEBENNETT, 20 letters that proved she existed, that proved she mattered. She fell asleep with ink on her fingers and hope in her chest. On a grey morning in late January, Rosa came back from town with her face like stone. She found Josephine in the stable office working through spring supply orders. Boss, you need to hear this. Josephine looked up. Marjorie was at the Golden Eagle last night, drunk and talking loud. Rosa pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, a gambling marker. Bartender gave me this. Said I might want you to see it before it disappeared. Josephine took the marker, read it, her face going cold. $600 to Helena Cross. Dated 2 weeks ago. There's more. Rosa's voice was grim. Bartender says Marjorie tried to get him to witness a guardianship loan request. Wanted to borrow against Ilara's trust fund. Used the $18,000 as collateral. Did the bartender sign? No. Told Marjorie to go to hell. Rosa shifted her weight. But boss, Marjorie's desperate. She owes Cross money she doesn't have, and Cross isn't a patient woman. That trust fund is the only thing standing between Marjorie and a shallow grave in the woods. Josephine stood, walked to the window. Outside, Ilara was helping Catherine hang laundry, laughing at something. The first real laugh Josephine had heard from her. We document everything, Josephine said. Every piece of evidence we can find. Doc's medical records, Rosa's gambling markers, Catherine's literacy progress reports. We bury Marjorie in paper. And if that's not enough, then we pray Judge Morrison cares more about justice than blood. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Boss, you know what folks are saying in town, don't you? I can guess. They're saying it's not proper. A single woman raising a young girl alone. Even with Catherine here, they're talking. Josephine's hands tightened on the window frame. Let them talk. Talking turns into testimony. If this goes to a hearing, Pierce will use it. Paint you as unfit. Then we show them the alternative. Josephine turned from the window. We show them what Marjorie did, what she would have done, and we let the judge decide which kind of person should raise Owen Bennett's daughter. Outside, Ilara folded a sheet with careful concentration, her tongue between her teeth. She looked up, saw Josephine watching, and waved. Josephine waved back, knowing the fight ahead would cost more than any of them wanted to pay. The church social on the first Sunday in February was the kind of gathering where reputations lived or died. Every rancher, merchant, and their families packed into the whitewashed building, then spilled onto the steps afterward for coffee and gossip that mattered more than any sermon. Josephine brought Ilara, her first public appearance since she'd been taken in. The whispers started before they reached the door. Catherine walked on Ilara's other side, chin up, daring anyone to comment. But the comments came anyway, just quiet enough to pretend they weren't meant to be heard. That's the Bennett girl, living out at Hartwell's place. Just the three of them. Single woman raising a child. It ain't natural. Ilara's hand found Josephine's. She squeezed once, steady, and kept walking. Inside, Reverend Phillips was already 10 minutes into his sermon. They slipped into a back pew. The Reverend's eyes found them, paused, then continued with his text. But something in his tone had shifted. The family is the bedrock of Christian society, he said, his voice carrying through the packed room. Father, mother, children, bound by blood and blessed by God. We must honor the natural order, respect the bonds that tie us to our kin. Catherine's face went hard as flint. The sermon continued in that vein for another 20 minutes. Blood ties, family loyalty, the sacred duty of caring for one's own relations. Every word felt aimed like an arrow. When they finally stood for the closing hymn, Ilara could feel eyes on her back like physical weight. The exodus afterward was worse. People clustered in tight groups, conversation stopping when Josephine approached. The merchants who'd always nodded to her now found reason to look elsewhere. Only the rancher families, the ones who worked their own land and knew what a day's honest labor meant, met her eyes. The church ladies converged like vultures on a carcass, led by Beatrice Whitmore, the banker's wife, with a smile sharp as winter wind. Miss Hartwell. She positioned herself directly in their path. We haven't been properly introduced to your house guest. This is Ilara Rose Bennett. Owen Bennett's daughter. Yes, we'd heard. Beatrice's eyes traveled over Ilara with the kind of assessment used for livestock at auction. Poor dear, losing her father so young. Then her aunt finding herself unable to care for her. Such a tragedy. Her aunt abandoned her at a depot to freeze. Josephine's voice was level. That's not tragedy. That's attempted murder. The women around Beatrice made shocked sounds, the kind that weren't actually shocked at all. That's a serious accusation. Beatrice said. Marjorie Dalton is a respected member of this community. A woman of business. Family to this child. A woman who gambles away money she doesn't have and tried to steal from an orphan's trust fund. Catherine's voice could have cut glass. But do go on about respect, Beatrice. Beatrice's smile never wavered. I'm simply concerned for propriety. A young girl living with a single woman. Even with your daughter's presence, Miss Hartwell, well, tongues will wag. Then let them wag somewhere else. Josephine moved to step around her. But Beatrice wasn't finished. Judge Morrison is a godly man, Miss Hartwell. He values Christian morality and proper family structure. You might want to consider that before this situation becomes permanent. She swept away, her flock following. Ilara felt Josephine's hand tighten on her shoulder. Don't listen to them, she said quietly. But Ilara had heard the truth underneath the words. She'd lived 11 years learning to read the currents beneath what people said, and what she'd heard was clear enough. The town was turning against them. The summons came 2 days later. Sheriff Dawson delivered it himself, looking uncomfortable as he handed Josephine the official document. Judge wants to see you in chambers this afternoon, if you can manage. Judge Clarence Morrison's office smelled like pipe tobacco and old leather. The judge sat behind a desk piled with legal documents, his weathered face unreadable. Marjorie's attorney, Lawrence Pierce, stood to one side, a thin man with slicked hair and a smile like a knife. Miss Hartwell, thank you for coming. Morrison gestured to a chair. We have matters to discuss. Josephine Saturday. Catherine had wanted to come, but the summons specified Josephine alone. Pierce opened a leather case, pulled out papers. Your Honor, I filed a petition on behalf of my client, Miss Marjorie Dalton, regarding the guardianship of her niece, Ilara Rose Bennett. I'm aware. Morrison's voice was dry. I've read your filing, Mr. Pierce. All 43 pages of it. Then you understand the situation. Miss Dalton is the child's blood aunt. Under territorial statute. I can read statute, Counselor. Morrison cut him off. What I want to know is why we're rushing this. The child's been with Miss Hartwell for 6 weeks. She's safe, fed, and by all accounts thriving. The manner of care is not the issue. Pierce's smile was professional, empty. The issue is legal authority. Miss Hartwell has no standing. She's essentially kidnapped my client's ward. That's a damned lie, Josephine started. Morrison held up a hand. Let him finish. Pierce continued, smooth as oil. Furthermore, Your Honor, there are concerns about the propriety of the arrangement. A single woman living alone with a pre-adolescent girl, even with her daughter present. The appearance alone damages the child's reputation and Miss Hartwell's standing in the community. The community's managed to do that on its own, Josephine said. With help from your client spreading poison. Miss Hartwell. Morrison's voice carried warning. This is not a courtroom yet. Pierce laid another document on the desk. Additionally, my client has concerns about the child's trust fund. Miss Hartwell may be acting in what she believes are the girl's best interests, but she has no legal authority to make decisions regarding her financial assets. Josephine's stomach went cold. I haven't touched that money. Not yet. Pierce's smile widened. But you could. And without proper legal oversight, there's nothing to prevent you from doing so. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Morrison studied the papers in front of him, his face giving nothing away. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Mr. Pierce, you're asking me to remove a child from a home where she's demonstrably improving and return her to a guardian who, according to these medical reports from Dr. Fletcher, previously neglected her. That's a significant request. I'm asking you to uphold territorial law. Pierce leaned forward. Blood relations take precedence. That's not my opinion, Your Honor. That's statute. Statute allows for exceptions when blood relations are proven unfit. Then let Miss Hartwell prove it in open court, with evidence that meets legal standards. Pierce's voice was confident. My client is prepared to defend her character and her guardianship claim before any tribunal. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his calendar. March 15th, 10 a.m. Full hearing on guardianship and trust fund administration. Josephine felt something sink in her chest. That's 6 weeks. It's what the court calendar allows. Morrison looked at her over his spectacles. Miss Hartwell, until that hearing, Ilara stays where she is. But understand this, I will rule according to law, not sentiment. If you want permanent custody, you'll need to prove Marjorie Dalton is morally unfit under the statute's definition. That's a high bar. And the trust fund petition? That will be heard at the same time. Morrison closed the file. Mr. Pierce, your client is not to approach the child or Miss Hartwell's property. Any contact goes through official channels. Understood. Pierce nodded, but his smile said he'd already won. Outside the courthouse, Josephine stood in the cold February air, the summons heavy in her coat pocket. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to build a case strong enough to overcome blood and law in a town that had already made up its mind. She thought of Ilara practicing her letters by candlelight. Thought of her laugh when Rosa taught her Spanish counting. Thought of the way she'd started to trust that the warmth might last. 6 weeks to prove that family wasn't always blood. It would have to be enough. The night before the hearing deadline, Ilara sat at the kitchen table with a candle burning low and a piece of paper in front of her. Her tongue pressed between her teeth in concentration as she formed the letters, one slow stroke at a time. The girl found her way home. She'd read that sentence from the primer 2 weeks ago. Now she was writing it herself. The letters weren't perfect. The G leaned wrong and the Y dragged too long, but they were hers. Words she'd made with her own hand. Catherine came in from checking the stove, saw what Ilara had written, and her face did something complicated. "Read it to me," she said quietly. Ilara read the words aloud, her voice steady. When she finished, Catherine pulled her into a hug that smelled like bread dough and lavender soap. "Your papa would be so proud." "Do you think the judge will care?" Ilara asked. "That I can read now? I think it proves something Marjorie never wanted proven." Catherine held her at arm's length. "That you're smart and capable and you deserve better than what she gave you." Josephine appeared in the doorway, Rosa behind her. Both women had the look of people who'd been talking serious business in the barn. "Show Josie what you wrote," Catherine said. Ilara held up the paper, suddenly shy. Josephine took it, read it carefully, then looked at her with something that might have been wonder. 12 weeks ago, you couldn't write your own name. Catherine taught me." "No." Her voice was firm. "Catherine showed you how. You did the learning. That's all you, Ilara." She set the paper down, then pulled a larger document from her coat. "The trust fund letter from the mining company. Can you read this?" Ilara took it, sounded out the harder words. "Wyoming Territorial Bank, Riverside. To whom it may concern. This letter confirms that the sum of $18,000 she stumbled on proceeds, but got the rest. Has been deposited in trust for Miss Ilara Rose Bennett. $18,000. Josephine repeated. "You understand what that means now?" She nodded. "It's what Papa left me for when I'm grown. And if Aunt Marjorie gets guardianship, she'll take it." She said it matter-of-fact, the way you'd state the sun rises or water's wet. "That's why she wants me back. Not because she cares." Rosa made a sound of approval. "Smart girl." Josephine exchanged a look with Catherine. "At the hearing tomorrow, Judge Morrison might ask you questions. He might ask you to read something to prove your learning. Would you be willing to do that?" Ilara's stomach twisted. The thought of standing in front of all those people, the church ladies who whispered, the merchants who looked away, Aunt Marjorie with her empty smile, made her want to hide under the table. But then she thought of the primer, of the way letters had stopped being meaningless scratches and started being words. Of the power in being able to read her own name. "I'll do it," she said. "If it helps." "It helps." Josephine pulled another paper from her coat, this one covered in numbers and columns. "This is the ranch ledger. Spring cattle count. Can you tell me what this number means?" Ilara looked at where she pointed. 2,427. "And this one?" $18. Multiply them. She did the arithmetic in her head. Rosa had been teaching her figuring along with the Spanish. $43,686. Exactly. Josephine's voice held quiet pride. That's the ranch's liquid equity. Proof that I'm financially stable enough to provide for you. Marjorie's attorney is going to claim I'm not fit, that I'm just a single woman with no experience raising children. These numbers say different. Rosa added, we took photographs of the cattle. New technology. Territorial court accepts them as evidence now. Shows we're not making up numbers. Catherine had been working on something at the counter. She came back with a folder, opened it to show careful charts tracking Ilara's progress, dates, lessons completed, reading level assessments. 12 weeks of documented improvement. This shows guardian fitness. Catherine said. Marjorie kept you illiterate for 11 years. Josie's had you for 12 weeks and you're reading at 3rd grade level. That contrast speaks louder than any argument we could make. Ilara touched the charts, seeing her own growth mapped out in Catherine's neat handwriting. It was proof. Proof she wasn't stupid or slow or worthless like Aunt Marjorie had always said. Proof that given a chance, she could learn anything. What if it's not enough? The question came out smaller than she meant it to. The adults exchanged looks. Then we fight harder, Josephine said. But Ilara, you need to understand something. Judge Morrison is bound by law. Territorial statute says blood kin takes precedence unless proven unfit. That's a high bar to clear. What makes someone unfit? Neglect, abuse, moral corruption, financial irresponsibility. Rosa ticked them off on her fingers. We've got evidence of all 4, but Marjorie's got Lawrence Pierce. That man could argue water uphill. And she's got the town on her side, Catherine added, her voice tight. Or enough of it to matter. Those church ladies have been spreading poison, saying it's improper for you to be here. That Josie's motivations aren't pure. It's all horseshit, excuse my language, but it creates doubt. Ilara had heard the whispers. She wasn't stupid. She knew what people thought when they saw a single woman rancher taking in a young girl. Never mind that Catherine was there. Never mind that Josephine had never been anything but proper and kind. People saw what they wanted to see. So what do we do? Josephine knelt beside her chair, putting them eye to eye. We tell the truth. We show the evidence. We prove that you're thriving here in ways you never did with Marjorie. And we trust that Judge Morrison cares more about your welfare than what the gossips think. And if he doesn't? Josephine's face was grim. Then I'll figure something else out. But Ilara, I want you to know something. Your papa was my partner, my friend. The day he died in that mine collapse, I made myself a promise. If anything happened to him, I'd look after his family. I failed to keep him alive. That wasn't your fault, Ilara interrupted. Maybe not, but I can keep this promise. Her hands were steady on Ilara's shoulders. I won't let Marjorie take you. I won't let her steal your future. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, you're staying here. That's a vow. Ilara threw her arms around her neck, holding tight. She smelled like leather and horse and the pipe tobacco she sometimes smoked in the evening. She smelled like safety. Thank you, she whispered. When she finally pulled back, Catherine was wiping her eyes with her apron, and Rosa was looking studiously at the ceiling. All right, Josephine said, her voice rough. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we show the judge what justice looks like. But as Ilara climbed the stairs to her room, she heard the adults talking low in the kitchen. Heard the worry they'd kept hidden from her. Heard Josephine say, if this goes wrong, I don't know what we'll do. She pressed her hand against the pocket watch in her nightstand drawer. The one thing Aunt Marjorie hadn't managed to take. The engraving was worn smooth, but she'd traced it so many times she knew every curve by heart. For Josephine Hartwell, partner in all things. Papa had trusted her. That would have to be enough. The general store smelled like coffee beans and lamp oil when Josephine walked in 3 days before the hearing. She needed fence wire and nails. Spring repairs wouldn't wait for legal battles. The bell above the door jangled and conversation stopped like someone had thrown a switch. 4 men stood at the counter. 3 turned away. The 4th, Frank Brenner, who ran the feed mill, met Josephine's eyes for half a second, then found something fascinating about his boots. Josephine walked to the counter. Nathan Phillips, the store owner, kept polishing a jar that was already clean. "Need 60 feet of fence wire," Josephine said. "And 5 pounds of nails." Phillips didn't look up. "Might be we're out." "I can see the wire from here, Nathan." "Reserved for another customer." The air in the store got thick. Josephine kept her voice level. "You've sold me supplies for 15 years. And I'll sell you more. Just not today." Phillips finally met her eyes, and what Josephine saw there wasn't malice. It was fear. "I've got a business to run, Josie. Can't afford to take sides." "This isn't about sides. It's about a child. It's about Marjorie Dalton's family rights." This from one of the men at the counter, Harold Mitchell, who owed Marjorie money, and everyone knew it. The words dug deeper than any blow. "Man's got a claim to his own blood. You keeping that girl out at your place. No proper woman around except your sister. People talk. Let them. Judge Morrison listens to what people say." Harold's voice carried the smugness of a man repeating someone else's argument. "Respectable folks have concerns. A single woman and a young girl under one roof. It ain't Christian." Josephine's fists clenched. Rosa had warned her about this. About keeping her temper, about not giving Marjorie's attorney ammunition. But the unfairness of it burned like acid. That girl was left to freeze on a depot platform on Christmas Eve by the woman you're defending. Where were your Christian concerns then? Marjorie made arrangements. Marjorie left her with $1.14 and a lie about prepaid fare. Josephine's voice went quiet, which made it more dangerous. "And you want to hand her back because I'm not married? That's your measure of morality?" Phillips cleared his throat. "Josie, please. Just come back next week, after the hearing, when things are settled." She looked at each of them in turn. Saw the way they wouldn't meet her eyes. Saw the cowardice dressed up as propriety. She walked out without the wire. Rosa was waiting by the wagon, face grim. "Heard it from out here. Town's made its choice." "Half the town," Josephine said. "The half that owes Marjorie money or fears her attorney." Rosa climbed up to the driver's seat. "Other half's with you. Just quieter about it." They rode in silence for a mile. Then Rosa said, "Boss, there's something you should know." Josephine waited. Catherine found something in the pocket watch. The one Ilara's been carrying. "What kind of something?" "Better if she shows you." Back at the ranch, Catherine had the pocket watch laid out on the kitchen table like a surgeon's instrument. She'd been cleaning it, she said. Noticed the back latch sat funny, like it had a second catch underneath. Owen was clever with mechanical things, she said. "Remember how you two rigged that pump system for the north pasture?" Josephine nodded. "Watch this." Catherine pressed the main latch, then a hidden spot near the hinge. The back plate opened normal, but then a second compartment unfolded from inside, so thin Josephine hadn't known it existed. Inside was a piece of paper folded small and sealed with wax. Owen's seal, with the initials OB pressed into red wax that had gone dark with age. Josephine's hand shook as she broke the seal. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. Owen's handwriting, cramped and urgent. Dated 1 week before the mine collapse that killed him. To whom it may concern. Should I die before my daughter Ilara reaches adulthood, I hereby state my wishes regarding her guardianship. Josephine Hartwell of Thornridge Ranch is the woman I trust with her life and her future. Not my sister Marjorie. Never Marjorie. Marjorie Dalton has demonstrated moral weakness, financial irresponsibility, and a character unsuited to raising a child. She gambles, she drinks, and she views family as assets to be exploited rather than people to be cherished. Josephine Hartwell was my partner in all things. She is honest, steady, and capable of providing the stable home my daughter deserves. I trust her as I have trusted no other soul. If questions arise about guardianship, Clarence knows what kind of woman Josie is. He'll understand. Signed, Owen Bennett. January 10, 1889. Josephine read it twice. Her vision blurred on the third reading. Clarence, Catherine said quietly. Judge Clarence Morrison. They knew each other. They served together in the war. Josephine's voice came out rough. Owen never talked about it much, but I knew they'd been at Shiloh. That was bad fighting. Rosa leaned over to read. This changes everything. It's not just your word against Marjorie's now. It's Owen's stated wishes in writing, with a judge's name attached. But will it hold up in court? Catherine's practical mind was already working. It's not witnessed. It was hidden in a watch. Pierce could argue it's not legally binding. Doesn't have to be legally binding, Josephine said. It just has to be true. She looked at the signature, remembering Owen's hand forming those letters. Remembering the man who'd built this ranch alongside her. Who trusted her with everything that mattered. Proof that given a chance, she could learn anything. What if it's not enough? The question came out smaller than she meant it to. The adults exchanged looks. Then we fight harder, Josephine said. But Ilara, you need to understand something. Judge Morrison is bound by law. Territorial statute says blood kin takes precedence unless proven unfit. That's a high bar to clear. What makes someone unfit? Neglect, abuse, moral corruption, financial irresponsibility. Rosa ticked them off on her fingers. We've got evidence of all four, but Marjorie's got Lawrence Pierce. That man could argue water uphill. And she's got the town on her side, Catherine added, her voice tight. Or enough of it to matter. Those church ladies have been spreading poison, saying it's improper for you to be here. That Josie's motivations aren't pure. It's all horseshit, excuse my language, but it creates doubt. Ilara had heard the whispers. She wasn't stupid. She knew what people thought when they saw a single woman taking in a young girl. Never mind that Catherine was there. Never mind that Josephine had never been anything but proper and kind. People saw what they wanted to see. So what do we do? Josephine knelt beside her chair, putting them eye to eye. We tell the truth. We show the evidence. We prove that you're thriving here in ways you never did with Marjorie. And we trust that Judge Morrison cares more about your welfare than what the gossips think. And if he doesn't? Josephine's face was grim. Then I'll figure something else out. But Ilara, I want you to know something. Your papa was my partner, my friend. The day he died in that mine collapse, I made myself a promise. If anything happened to him, I'd look after his family. I failed to keep him alive. That wasn't your fault, Ilara interrupted. Maybe not, but I can keep this promise. Her hands were steady on Ilara's shoulders. I won't let Marjorie take you. I won't let her steal your future. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, you're staying here. That's a vow. Ilara threw her arms around her neck, holding tight. Josephine smelled like leather and horse and the pipe tobacco she sometimes smoked in the evening. She smelled like safety. Thank you, Ilara whispered. When she finally pulled back, Catherine was wiping her eyes with her apron, and Rosa was looking studiously at the ceiling. "All right," Josephine said, her voice rough. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we show the judge what justice looks like." But as Ilara climbed the stairs to her room, she heard the adults talking low in the kitchen. Heard the worry they'd kept hidden from her. Heard Josephine say, "If this goes wrong, I don't know what we'll do." Ilara pressed her hand against the pocket watch in her nightstand drawer, the one thing Aunt Marjorie hadn't managed to take. The engraving was worn smooth, but she'd traced it so many times she knew every curve by heart. For Josephine Hartwell, partner in all things. Papa had trusted her. That would have to be enough. The general store smelled like coffee beans and lamp oil when Josephine walked in 3 days before the hearing. She needed fence wire and nails. Spring repairs would not wait for legal battles. The bell above the door jangled and conversation stopped like someone had thrown a switch. 4 men stood at the counter. 3 turned away. The 4th, Frank Brenner, who ran the feed mill, met Josephine's eyes for half a second, then found something fascinating about his boots. Josephine walked to the counter. Nathan Phillips, the store owner, kept polishing a jar that was already clean. "Need 60 feet of fence wire," Josephine said. "And 5 pounds of nails." Phillips did not look up. "Might be we're out." "I can see the wire from here, Nathan." "Reserved for another customer." The air in the store grew thick. Josephine kept her voice level. "You've sold me supplies for 15 years. And I'll sell you more. Just not today." Phillips finally met her eyes, and what Josephine saw there was not malice. It was fear. "I've got a business to run, Josie. Can't afford to take sides. This isn't about sides. It's about a child. It's about Marjorie Dalton's family rights." This from one of the men at the counter, Harold Mitchell, who owed Marjorie money, and everyone knew it. "Man's got a claim to his own blood. You keeping that girl out at your place, no proper woman around except your daughter. People talk. Let them. Judge Morrison listens to what people say." Harold's voice carried the smugness of a man repeating someone else's argument. "Respectable folks have concerns. A single woman and a young girl under one roof. It ain't Christian." Josephine's fists clenched. Rosa had warned her about this, about keeping her temper, about not giving Pierce ammunition, but the unfairness of it burned like acid. That girl was left to freeze on a depot platform on Christmas Eve by the woman you're defending. Where were your Christian concerns then? Marjorie made arrangements. Marjorie left her with $1.14 and a lie about prepaid fare. Josephine's voice went quiet, which made it more dangerous. "And you want to hand her back because I'm not married? That's your measure of morality." Phillips cleared his throat. "Josie, please. Just come back next week, after the hearing, when things are settled." She looked at each of them in turn. Saw the way they would not meet her eyes. Saw the cowardice dressed up as propriety. She walked out without the wire. Rosa was waiting by the wagon, face grim. "Heard it from out here. Town's made its choice." "Half the town," Josephine said. "The half that owes Marjorie money or fears her attorney." Rosa climbed up to the driver's seat. "Other half's with you. Just quieter about it." They rode in silence for a mile. Then Rosa said, "Boss, there's something you should know." Josephine waited. Catherine found something in the pocket watch. The one Ilara's been carrying. "What kind of something?" "Better if she shows you." Back at the ranch, Catherine had the pocket watch laid out on the kitchen table like a surgeon's instrument. She had been cleaning it, she said. Noticed the back latch sat funny, like it had a second catch underneath. Owen was clever with mechanical things, she said. Remember how you two rigged that pump system for the North pasture? Josephine nodded. Watch this. Catherine pressed the main latch, then a hidden spot near the hinge. The back plate opened normally, but then a second compartment unfolded from inside, so thin Josephine had never known it existed. Inside lay a piece of paper folded small and sealed with wax. Owen's seal, with the initials OB pressed into red wax that had gone dark with age. Josephine's hand shook as she broke the seal. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. Owen's handwriting, cramped and urgent, dated 1 week before the mine collapse that killed him. To whom it may concern. Should I die before my daughter Ilara reaches adulthood, I hereby state my wishes regarding her guardianship. Josephine Hartwell of Thornridge Ranch is the woman I trust with her life and her future. Not my sister Marjorie. Never Marjorie. Marjorie Dalton has demonstrated moral weakness, financial irresponsibility, and a character unsuited to raising a child. She gambles, she drinks, and she views family as assets to be exploited rather than people to be cherished. Josephine Hartwell was my partner in all things. She is honest, steady, and capable of providing the stable home my daughter deserves. I trust her as I have trusted no other soul. If questions arise about guardianship, Clarence knows what kind of woman Josie is. He'll understand. Signed, Owen Bennett. January 10, 1889. Rosa pointed to the back. There's more. Josephine turned the paper over and found a single line in different ink, as if it had been added later. Clarence knows I carried him 3 miles at Shiloh with a mini ball in my spine. He knows what a promise means. The kitchen went silent. Owen saved the judge's life, Catherine said softly. During the war. Josephine felt something shift. Not quite hope, but close. A man does not forget that. And a man like Morrison, he'll honor that debt. Unless statute does not give him a choice. Rosa's voice was cautious. Bloodkin law is clear. Even with Owen's letter, even with the judge owing him a life debt, if the law says Marjorie gets guardianship, Morrison might not have room to rule otherwise. Then we make room. Josephine folded the letter carefully. We show this at the hearing. We let the judge see Owen's actual wishes. And we trust that a man who was saved by Owen Bennett will honor his friend's last request. Catherine touched the watch, running her finger over the engraving. Owen hid this for a reason. He knew Marjorie might contest guardianship. He planned for this. He planned for me to protect his daughter. Josephine's jaw set hard. And that is exactly what I'm going to do. Through the window, Ilara was helping with evening chores, carrying water to the horses with careful concentration. She had gained 10 pounds since Christmas, learned to read, started to laugh without looking over her shoulder first. 3 days until the hearing. 3 days to prepare for a fight that would determine whether Owen Bennett's daughter got the future her father wanted or the one Marjorie's greed demanded. Josephine slipped the letter into her coat pocket, close to her heart. Let's finish this, she said. The day before the hearing, Marjorie Dalton rode out to the ranch alone. No sheriff this time, no attorney, just a woman with whiskey on her breath and desperation in her eyes. Josephine was mending fence at the north pasture when Rosa came riding hard, her face tight with warning. Marjorie's at the house, talking to Catherine through the door. She won't let her in, but... Josephine was already moving, spurring her horse toward home. The animal sensed her urgency and ran flat out, hooves throwing mud from the thawing ground. She reached the ranch to find Marjorie on the porch, Catherine blocking the doorway with a rifle across her arms. Ilara's face was visible in the window behind her, pale and frightened. Get off my property. Josephine's voice carried across the yard. Marjorie turned, and Josephine saw something she had not expected. The woman looked hollowed out, eyes sunken, hands shaking, the smell of cheap whiskey coming off her in waves. Just want to talk, Josephine. Woman to woman. We have nothing to discuss. We do. Marjorie came down the steps, careful like she was walking on ice. I'm prepared to make you an offer. Josephine dismounted, keeping the horse between them. What kind of offer? Marjorie pulled a folded paper from her coat. I'll withdraw my guardianship petition. Sign over all parental rights. You can keep Ilara, raise her legal and proper. The silence stretched. Rosa had ridden up, positioning herself at an angle. Catherine had not moved from the doorway. In exchange for what? Josephine asked, though she already knew. $2,000. Marjorie's smile was weak, nothing like her usual confidence. Cash money. Sign the papers, give me the funds, and I'm gone. Out of Wyoming territory. You'll never hear from me again. You're selling your niece. I'm being practical. Marjorie's voice rose, defensive. She's better off with you. I can see that. But I have debts, Josie. Serious debts. Helena Cross is not a patient woman, and I owe her $600 with interest running. She's threatening things I can't afford to have happen. Should have thought of that before you gambled. I know. Marjorie's hands shook as she held out the paper. I know I'm a worthless sister. I know I failed Owen's daughter. But this way, everybody wins. Ilara gets a good home, you get legal custody, and I get to keep breathing. No. Josephine looked at the woman in front of her and saw the fear beneath the desperation, saw a coward who had tried to throw a child away for money and was now trying to sell that same child for survival. That's fair, isn't it? Marjorie pushed. No. Josephine's voice was flat. Get off my land. But you'd win. Legal guardianship, no court battle, all settled clean. Marjorie took a step closer. $2,000. That's nothing to a woman with your assets. You could. No. Josephine cut her off. You want to know why? Because that little girl up there watching us? She deserves better than being bought and sold like cattle. She deserves justice. She deserves a court to hear what you did to her, and she deserves to see you answer for it. Marjorie's face twisted. You self-righteous fool. You think the judge will side with you? Pierce has been working that courtroom for weeks. He's got half the town convinced you're unfit. A single woman with questionable motives, keeping a young girl isolated. Then let the judge decide. The judge will follow the law. Marjorie's voice turned ugly. And the law says blood kin. You're nobody to that girl. Just her dead father's friend playing hero. Josephine moved then, fast enough that Marjorie stumbled backward. Rosa was there instantly, hand on Josephine's arm, holding her back. Easy, boss. That's what she wants. Josephine realized Rosa was right. Marjorie stood there with that sick smile creeping back and, behind her, at the bunkhouse window, Josephine caught movement, someone watching, someone ready to swear that Josephine Hartwell had assaulted Marjorie Dalton the day before the hearing. Get off my land. Josephine said each word separately, clearly. Marjorie backed toward her horse. You're making a mistake, Josie. I'm offering you the easy way. Tomorrow in that courtroom, it won't be easy. Pierce will tear you apart. He'll make you look like a predator, make that little girl look like a fool, and when it's done, I'll have guardianship and that trust fund, and there's not a blessed thing you can do about it. We'll see. Marjorie mounted, her movements unsteady. $2,000, Josie. Offer stands until morning. After that, she smiled, the smile of someone with nothing left to lose. After that, you'll wish you'd taken it. She rode off, swaying in the saddle. Rosa let go of Josephine's arm. That was a setup. Someone was watching from the bunkhouse. I know. If I'd hit her? I know. Catherine came out with Ilara behind her? The girl's face was white. I heard what she said. About selling me. Josephine knelt to her level. You're not for sale, Ilara. Not now. Not ever. But what if the judge? Then we appeal. And if that doesn't work, we find another way. But I'm not paying Marjorie Dalton 1 cent, and I'm not letting her walk away without answering for what she did. Josephine's voice was firm. Some things can't be bought. Justice is one of them. Ilara threw her arms around her. Over the girl's head, Josephine met Catherine's eyes. Her daughter's face was grave. She'll use this, Catherine said quietly. At the hearing. She'll say you turned down a reasonable settlement out of spite. That you're dragging out Ilara's uncertainty for your own pride. Let her say it. Josephine stood, Ilara still holding her hand. That woman tried to kill this child. She left her to freeze for money. And now she wants to sell her like she's livestock. I won't pay her. I won't reward her. And I won't let her disappear without the truth coming out. Rosa nodded slowly. Then we'd better be ready for tomorrow. Because Marjorie just showed us how desperate she is. And desperate people do dangerous things. That night, Josephine sat up late in the ranch office, going over the evidence one more time, Doc's medical reports, Catherine's literacy charts, Rosa's gambling markers, the cattle ledgers, Owen's letter. It would have to be enough. Through the window she could see Ilara's lamp still burning. The girl was practicing her reading, Josephine knew because she had checked on her an hour earlier and found her with the primer open, lips moving as she sounded out words. She deserved better than Marjorie. I'll help you complete this rewritten story section. However, I notice you've asked me to continue rewriting the story, but I need to use my remaining tool call appropriately according to the guidelines. Since this is a creative rewriting task that doesn't require web search, fact-checking, or external information gathering, I can provide the rewritten content directly without needing to make a tool call. Better than corruption and greed and people who saw children as assets to exploit. She deserved justice. Tomorrow they would find out if justice was something you could still get in a territorial courtroom, or if blood and law were all that mattered. Josephine touched Owen's letter in her pocket, feeling the paper crinkle. I won't fail her, she said to the empty room. I swear it. The lamp burned low, and outside, the last of winter's ice was melting into spring. The territorial courthouse was packed. Every bench filled, people standing along the walls, the air thick with body heat and tobacco smoke and the smell of wool drying from morning rain. Josephine had never seen this many folks turn out for a guardianship hearing. But then, this was not just about guardianship anymore. This was entertainment. This was the town choosing sides. Judge Clarence Morrison sat behind his bench, face carved from granite, giving nothing away. He was 60-some with steel-grey hair and eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by legal theatrics. Marjorie sat at the plaintiff's table with Lawrence Pierce, looking cleaner than she had looked yesterday. Sober, respectable, the picture of a concerned aunt. Josephine sat opposite with Ilara beside her, Catherine on the girl's other side. Rosa stood against the back wall with the other ranch hands, women and men who had ridden 12 miles in the rain to be here. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur. Territorial Court is now in session. The Honorable Clarence Morrison presiding. The judge banged his gavel once. Be seated. Case number 47, Dalton versus Hartwell. Petition for guardianship and trust fund administration. He looked over his spectacles at both tables. Mr. Pierce, you filed this petition. Present your case. Pierce stood, smooth as oil. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of territorial law. Marjorie Dalton is the blood aunt of Elara Rose Bennett, orphaned by her father's death 6 months ago. Under statute, blood relations of the first degree take precedence in guardianship matters. Miss Hartwell, while well-intentioned, has no legal standing. Hartwell was named in Owen Bennett's will, Morrison said. A will that was never properly probated, Your Honour, and which contains guardianship language that conflicts with territorial statute. The law is clear, blood kin takes priority unless proven morally unfit. Pierce called his first witness, a banker who testified that Marjorie had steady employment. A minister who stated Marjorie attended church regularly. 2 merchants who claimed Marjorie was a woman of good character, if occasionally challenged by financial circumstances. Then Pierce called Marjorie herself. Marjorie took the stand with her hat in her hands, playing the part of the grieving, overwhelmed aunt. She testified about taking Elara in after Owen's death, about struggling to provide for her despite limited means, about making the difficult decision to seek institutional care when she realized she could not give Elara the life she deserved. The depot incident, Pierce prompted. Tell the court what happened. I arranged passage to St. Catherine's orphanage. Marjorie's voice was steady, practiced. A fine institution run by good Christian women. I prepaid the fare, $3.50. Left Elara at the depot with a ticket and clear instructions. Did you abandon her? Absolutely not. I ensured she had everything she needed. If the ticket master failed to honor the prepaid arrangement, that's his failing, not mine. It was a lie so smooth it almost sounded true. Pierce continued. And Miss Hartwell's current guardianship, do you have concerns? I do. Marjorie's face arranged itself into worry. Josephine Hartwell is unmarried. Lives alone except for her daughter. A young girl under her roof, it's not proper. People talk. And while I'm sure her intentions are good, there are questions about her fitness to raise a female child. The courtroom murmured. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked down. Order. Pierce yielded the witness. Morrison looked at Josephine. Cross-examination. Josephine stood. She had never done this before, never questioned anyone in a courtroom, but she had practiced with Catherine, and she knew what needed to be said. Miss Dalton, you testified you paid $3.50 for Elara's train fare. That's correct. The ticket master's records show no such payment. We have his sworn affidavit. Josephine held up the paper. Marjorie didn't flinch. Then he pocketed the money. That's theft, not abandonment on my part. And you left her with $1.14 for incidentals. In 20 below weather on Christmas Eve. Josephine's voice stayed level. How long did you expect her to survive if no train came? The ticket master should have. Answer the question. How long? Marjorie's jaw tightened. I expected the arrangements I made to be honored. You gamble, Miss Dalton. Pierce shot up. Objection. Relevance. It goes to character, Your Honor, and to motive. Morrison nodded. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Miss Dalton. I occasionally play cards. Yes, for small stakes. Small stakes. Josephine pulled out the gambling markers Rosa had collected. These show $600 owed to Helena Cross. That's not small stakes. Those are private debts. These debts came due in December, right before you left Elara at the depot. Josephine laid out the timeline. And you filed a petition to liquidate her trust fund, $18,000 left by her father. You needed money. She had money. Convenient. That's a slanderous accusation. It's documented fact. Josephine handed the papers to the judge. The petition itself, filed January 2nd. Requesting immediate access to trust funds for accumulated expenses. Morrison read it, his face darkening. Pierce tried to recover. My client was attempting to secure proper care. Your client was attempting theft. Josephine turned back to Marjorie. You kept Ilara illiterate, didn't you? 11 years old and couldn't read her own name when she came to me. She's slow. She's reading at 3rd grade level now after 12 weeks. Josephine laid the medical affidavit on the judge's bench. Dr. Fletcher's reports show she was deliberately malnourished and neglected under your care. And Rosa Santos has testimony from the Golden Eagle Saloon that you attempted to borrow against the trust fund, using Ilara as collateral for your gambling debts. The courtroom erupted. Morrison's gavel came down hard. Order? I will have order. When quiet returned, Pierce was on his feet. Your Honor, this is character assassination. My client's financial struggles don't negate her blood relationship or her legal rights under territorial statute. They speak to moral fitness, Morrison said coldly. Which is the statutory exception? Continue, Miss Hartwell. Josephine called her witnesses. Doc Fletcher testified about the neglect, the malnutrition, the untreated frostbite scars. Catherine presented her literacy charts, the dramatic improvement in 12 weeks. Rosa showed the gambling records and the attempted fraud. Then Josephine presented the cattle ledgers, 2,427 head at $18 average value, $43,686 in documented equity. This proves financial stability, Josephine said. Proves I can provide for Ilara in ways Marjorie Dalton never could. Finally, she pulled out Owen's letter. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. This was hidden in Owen Bennett's pocket watch, written 1 week before he died. It names his wishes for his daughter's guardianship. Pierce objected. Unwitnessed. Legally inadmissible. I'll decide what's admissible. Morrison took the letter and read it. His face changed, something passed over it like a shadow. When he looked up, his eyes found Marjorie. You knew about this letter. I know, Your Honor. Your brother explicitly stated you were unfit. That Josephine Hartwell was the woman he trusted. Morrison's voice had gone quiet. He mentions me by name. Says I would understand. The courtroom held its breath. Your Honor, Josephine said carefully, I believe Owen Bennett saved your life at Shiloh during the war. Morrison removed his spectacles, cleaned them slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. Owen Bennett carried me 3 miles with a mini ball lodged in his spine. I was bleeding out from a gut wound. He got me to the field hospital, refused treatment for himself until I was stabilized. The judge's hands weren't quite steady. He died thinking I didn't know about that bullet. But I knew. And I've carried that debt for 27 years. The silence was absolute. Morrison put his spectacles back on. Mr. Pierce, your client's case rests on blood relation and statutory priority. I've heard the evidence of her gambling, her debts, her neglect of the child in her care, and her attempt to liquidate the trust fund for personal gain. Do you have any evidence that contradicts these facts? Pierce's face had gone pale. Your Honor, the statute is clear. The statute allows for exceptions when blood relations prove morally unfit. I'm prepared to rule that Miss Marjorie Dalton meets that standard. Morrison looked at Ilara. Young lady, approach the bench. Ilara stood on shaking legs. Josephine started to rise with her, but Morrison shook his head. She walked forward alone, small and brave in her clean dress. Can you read, Miss Bennett? Yes, sir. Read this. He handed her the trust fund document. Ilara took it, her voice clear and steady. Wyoming Territorial Bank, Riverside. This letter confirms that the sum of $18,000, proceeds from the sale of the Silver Pine mining claim, has been deposited in trust for Miss Ilara Rose Bennett, to be held until her 18th birthday. Perfect. Not a single stumble. Morrison's face softened. Who taught you to read? Miss Catherine Hartwell, sir. Miss Josie helped with the numbers. And do you understand what this document means? Yes, sir. It's the money Papa left me for when I'm grown. Do you want to go back to your Aunt Marjorie? Elara looked at Marjorie, then back at the judge. Her voice didn't waver. No, sir. I want to stay with Miss Josie. She's kept her promise to Papa. She's kept me safe. Morrison nodded. Return to your seat. He waited until Elara was back beside Josephine. Then he picked up his gavel. I've heard enough. Guardianship of Elara Rose Bennett is awarded to Josephine Hartwell, with all legal rights and responsibilities pertaining thereto. The trust fund shall remain intact, locked in Territorial Bank custody under Miss Hartwell's stewardship until Miss Bennett reaches her 18th birthday. The gavel came down. Furthermore, Marjorie Dalton is ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1,200 for attempted fraud and is hereby enjoined from any contact with the minor child. This guardianship is permanent and final. Marjorie surged to her feet. This isn't legal. You can't. I can, and I have. Sheriff, escort Miss Dalton from my courtroom. The courtroom exploded. Josephine pulled Elara into her arms as she burst into tears, relief and joy and the release of months of fear. Catherine was crying too, and Rosa was pounding Josephine's back hard enough to leave bruises. Judge Morrison watched them, his stern face cracking into something almost like a smile. Then he caught Josephine's eye and nodded once. A debt 27 years old, finally paid. 3 weeks after the hearing, the first real warmth came to Wyoming territory. The kind of April morning where you could smell the earth waking up, where larks sang from fence posts and the creek ran full with snowmelt. Josephine stood in the north pasture with Elara, watching Rosa and the hands bring in the spring calves for branding. The animals bawled and kicked, their mothers answering from the holding pen. Smoke rose from the branding fire, carrying the smell of burning mesquite. That one. Rosa pointed to a rust-colored calf, strong and healthy. Good first one for her to mark. Elara looked up at Josephine, uncertain. I can do it. You're family now. Family helps with the work. Josephine handed her the leather gloves, helped her pull them on. They were too big, but she'd grow into them. Rosa heated the brand, the T-bar mark that had been on Thornridge cattle for 30 years. When the iron glowed right, she nodded to Josephine. Hold it steady, Josephine said, guiding Elara's hands on the handle. Press firm, but not too hard. 3 seconds, then lift. The calf was already secured, 2 hands holding it still. Elara positioned the brand, took a breath, and pressed. The hide sizzled, smoke rising. She counted under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Then lifted. Perfect. The T-bar stood clear and clean on the calf's flank. Rosa released the animal and it scrambled back to its mother. Cora stared at the brand on the calf's hip, her face tangled up with wonder and a new kind of responsibility. That mark was permanent, a promise burned into hide. That's yours now, Josephine said. Your mark means you're part of this ranch, part of this family, for as long as you want it. Elara pulled off the gloves and handed them back. Miss Josie, can I ask you something? Always. Why do you do it? Take me in. Fight for me. Risk everything. Her voice was quiet. You didn't have to. Papa was already gone. Josephine knelt to her level, the way she always did when something mattered. Your papa and I built this place together. Started with nothing but 300 head and more hope than sense. We made a deal, we'd always look after each other's family. Always. She pulled the pocket watch from her vest, the one she'd taken to carrying after the trial. Opened it so Elara could see the engraving she'd traced 1,000 times. Partner in all things. That's not just about cattle and land, Josephine said. It's about keeping promises. About doing right by the people you love. She closed the watch and pressed it into Elara's hands. Your papa wanted you to have this when you were ready. I think you're ready now. Elara's eyes filled. But it has your name on it. And now it's yours, along with everything else that matters. Josephine stood, resting a hand on her shoulder. You're my daughter now, Elara rose. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. And that's stronger than blood ever was. Elara threw her arms around her, holding tight. Over the girl's head, Josephine saw Catherine watching from the porch, wiping her eyes with her apron. That evening, after the branding was done and the hands had headed for the bunkhouse, Josephine found Elara on the front steps. She sat watching the sun go down, the pocket watch open in her lap. Josephine settled beside her, coffee mug warming her hands. They sat in easy silence, watching the sky turn orange, then pink, then purple. Marjorie left Wyoming, Josephine said finally. Sheriff Dawson told me this morning. Took what money she had and went south. Colorado, maybe New Mexico. Good. Elara's voice was firm. I hope I never see her again. Probably won't. Judge Morrison's order makes it very clear what happens if she comes back. More silence. A hawk circled overhead, hunting the last light. I've been thinking, Elara said. About the money. Papa's trust fund. What about it? It's a lot of money, $18,000. She turned the watch over, tracing the engraving. I was thinking, when I'm grown, I could use some of it to build a school. A real school, with books and slates and a proper teacher, for ranch kids who can't get to town regular. Josephine felt warmth spread through her chest. That's a fine idea. Papa would have liked that, I think. His money helping other kids learn. She looked up at her. Would you help me when the time comes? I'll help you with anything you want to build, Elara rose. That's a promise. The sun kissed the horizon, painting the world gold. Somewhere in the barn, a horse nickered. The creek ran its endless song. Spring had come full and complete, washing away the last traces of the winter that had almost killed her. Miss Josie. Her voice was soft. Yeah? Thank you. For not giving up on me. Josephine pulled her close. This child who wasn't hers by blood, but was hers by every measure that mattered. Never could have given up, she said. Your family. And family doesn't quit. They sat together as the stars came out, watching the first constellations pierce the darkening sky. Inside the house, Catherine was making supper, the smell of roast chicken and fresh bread drifting through the open windows. From the bunkhouse, a guitar started up, playing something slow and sweet. This was home. This was family. Not the kind you were born into, but the kind you chose. The kind you built with promises kept and hard fights won, in the simple act of showing up when someone needed you. Elara closed the watch and held it in both hands. Tomorrow she'd practice her reading. Tomorrow she'd help with chores. Tomorrow she'd keep growing into the woman her father had hoped she'd become. But tonight, she was just a girl on a porch step, safe and warm and loved, watching the Wyoming sky turn dark, while the woman who'd saved her life sat beside her in comfortable silence. Some winters were meant to end, and some endings were just better beginnings dressed up in old snow. The first star blazed bright above the western hills, and Elara made a wish. Josephine Hartwell never did remarry. She raised Elara Rose like the girl had been born to her. Taught her ranching and ledgers, the value of a handshake, and what honest work looked like. When Elara turned 18, that trust fund sat waiting, $18,000 untouched, interest lifted it to $22,400. She used it to attend a teacher's college in Riverside. Came back with a degree and a mission. She built a schoolhouse on Hartwell land. 1 room at first, then 2, then a proper academy. She taught reading to ranch kids, miners' children, anyone who needed words to claim their own voice. She never charged tuition. Said her papa's money ought to multiply in knowledge, not sit idle gathering dust. Marjorie Dalton died in a Santa Fe boarding house in 1904, pneumonia. No family claimed the body. Folks said it was a cold way to go. Fitting, maybe, for someone who had once left a child to freeze. Judge Morrison visited the ranch twice a year until his death in 1911. Always brought peppermints for Ilara. Always shook Josephine's hand long and firm. Never spoke of Shiloh directly, but Josephine knew some debts run forward through time, paid off in the lives you managed to save. The thing about family, Josephine used to say, is it ain't blood that binds. It's who shows up when the snow's coming down and the lamp's burning low. It's who stays when staying costs something. Blood can leave you on a depot platform. Blood can gamble away your future for whiskey and cards. But family, real family, rides out in a blizzard because they gave their word to a dying friend. And honor doesn't freeze. Last time anyone wrote about that ranch, spring of 1951, Ilara Rose was teaching her granddaughter to brand calves. Wildflowers had taken over the hillside where the old depot used to stand. Rails long gone, building torn down decades before. But flowers grew thick as hope, yellow and purple and white, and the creek still ran clear. Some winters are improper things. And some endings are just better beginnings, wearing old snow as a disguise.